DiPalma here. Just want to give you guys a quick recap of the Lake Fork event. Finished 33rd, made some really good calls in that event throughout the tournament. The water was about 6.5, 7 feet low, so it was a totally new lake for myself going there. I've been there 3 or 4 times now in the past. But I'll tell you, man, the biggest part was there was a lot going on. There was actually still a good amount of fish that seemed like they were still spawning. Even though I couldn't see them, I can, visually cast to a lot of the spots, and in my mind I can, make the cast over and over. Fish would pick it up a lot of different times, carry it off the bed, drop it again. In the tournament, it seemed like though all the fish that were on beds, they were gone as far as the fish that I was casting to. One thing that really held true, the majority of the fish, in my opinion, were in that mid-range, anywhere from like that 9 to 12 foot range on Fork this time around. So brim beds, shallower shell bars, that kind of thing for me was definitely by far the best. It was key. We did have a ton of wind this time in this tournament. We had like sustained wind for like the first 3 days that blew like 25 mile an hour out of the south. So it blew right up the lake the entire time. So it kind of made it a little bit harder to fish, but the fishing nonetheless was still really good. For me, this was the deal, a Magnum trick worm. I threw it on a 3/4, even though I was fishing like that 9 to 12 foot range. I still threw it on a 3/4 ounce head because it was so windy. I still needed that bottom contact. The water had good clarity, so I went for a watermelon candy color. It's like my favorite color when the water's kind of clear. I threw it on a 20-pound, 100% fluorocarbon high seas. Rod-wise, I went for a Shimano Zodius, 7'5", medium heavy. Awesome rod for this. Whether I was fishing, dragging it all the way to the boat and still close, or even on really far cast, plenty of rod to sink this hook. It's not really a heavy wire hook, so it was more like a wind down and kind of just reel into them really hard, and it penetrated the mouth really good with this hook. Actually, my first tournament throwing the new Bantam, as always, I'm super impressed. XG for me, always super fast most of the time. Great reel. So I would tell you guys, if you're gonna go to Fork in April or May, man, a lot of them brim beds are in the timber. And I kind of figured this out late day 2 in practice. I started idling around, and I can see that once I started idling through the timber, I'm like, man, there's a lot of brim beds and a lot of shell bars in the timber too. It was kind of a mix of both that was really key for me, but the brim bed really seemed like a lot of fish that were spawning in that timber, from that 2 to 4 range. Once they backed off, they went out there. A lot of the brim beds were in that 8 to 9, and that's where I kind of keyed in most of the time. And once I really figured out what was going on, it made it a lot easier. Every brim bed I got to, I started marking them, because I'd go to a brim bed, throw a cast, and donk, I'd get a bite. So I was like, man, I gotta just start marking all these. So I pretty much in the tournament ran around mostly fishing them brim beds. The brim bed bite's kind of a thing I think a lot of guys don't do. The brim bed bite is something you really just have to focus on. If you're gonna do it, you might hit 5 or 6 or 7 brim beds in a row, like the big sections of brim beds, and you might not get a bite, then all of a sudden you get to the 8th or 9th one and donk, you catch a big one. A lot of my experience, dude, a lot of the big bass are gonna be around the brim that time of the year. Not a big, vast majority of number of fish are doing it, but the fish that are doing it are really quality fish for brim bed fishing. And shell bar fishing, the good thing about shell bars is, same deal, there's a lot of shell bars on Fork, tons of them, they're all over the place. And dude, you might go down like 30 or 40 of them that don't have fish, and then you'll find one brim bed or one shell bar that has them, and it'll be loaded with largemouth. So that event was super key for that. So if you guys are ever going back to Fork, maybe them tips help you out, maybe they won't, but definitely a good way to catch them. Whenever you're in Texas or down in Florida, dude, big worms, Magnum stuff, and big rods and heavy lines. So hope helps you guys out, and we'll get to you guys in the next one.